Studio now, royal commentator Pandora Forsyth. Nice to see you. And down the line, we're joined by TalkTV's royal commentator Rupert Lowe. So let's start with you, Pandora. Why has this resurfaced now? And why is Prince Andrew very probably living in absolute abject fear of what the new year might bring?
Yeah, well, he's in the headlines again, and I'm sure it's for reasons that he doesn't want to be in. For the past couple of years, he's been really trying to get back his public reputation into good order. Obviously, his late mother stripped him of all his HRH titles. So for him, this is his worst nightmare, as you said. Now, lawyers for the people who are involved in all of these papers have 14 days to appeal to the judge. 2 weeks, right before Christmas and New Year. Talk about timing. As you said, his idea of hell. Now, we don't know if he is named. The probability of him being named is very high, but we don't know. And as you said, he has categorically denied all of this, and as has Buckingham Palace.
And who's bringing what case here? What exactly is being answered in court? What is being suggested? What is the allegation? Who is it being brought against? What's actually happening?
So this comes all the way back to 2015, where we had that huge case involving Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and it all comes back to that. So we go on, we move forward, and he settled outside of court, Prince Andrew, with Virginia. Now, that's all been sorted. It allegedly cost around £12 million. But his name has been brought up again. And because these are legal documents and everybody, is entitled to see them as they've been pushed on from the press, which is what the press and the media have been pushing for, this is why the judge has said, OK, it's time to release them. So he's got 2 weeks to keep his name out the papers.
Rupert Lowe, TalkTV's royal commentator. I mean, obviously very dark days for Prince Andrew, who I think we all believed made that huge payment of £12 million, hoping that this would put the entire thing to bed and we wouldn't have to hear about it again. It doesn't seem to have worked as a policy, does it?
Well, it was never going to work, because while there was still all the issues around the Jeffrey Epstein case, Prince Andrew's name is always going to be linked with it. So I think it would have been a very interesting get-together at Windsor Castle today, because all the members were gathering for lunch, for those ones not going to Sandringham and everyone, and I assume the Duke of York was there as well. So once again, he is just creating difficulties for the royal family. He has at all times protested his innocence, and so we've got to remember that. But clearly, when it comes to paying $12 million when you're as innocent, why? And therein lies his problem. So here we have the possibility of him being named again, along with a lot of other prominent people. And it's going to be an uncomfortable few days, I'm pretty sure, for the Duke of York and other high-profile people who've had their names linked with Jeffrey Epstein and the scandals around that. So for the Duke of York, I'm not sure it's going to be as comfortable as Christmas as he'd hoped.
And who is Joanna Soberg? What do we know about her? Was she somebody who was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein, or says she was, or what does she say happened?
Yeah, so this goes back to 2001, so many years ago, but, he can't seem to sort of stay away from this, as, we've just said, he categorically denies it. But she says that it was in an apartment in America, in Jeffrey's apartment, if I'm not wrong in saying, where she says that he groped her breast. Completely categorically denies that entirely. But of course, in all of these papers, there are lots of victims who won't be named in it, but lots of very high-profile names. And because he is part of the royal family, yes, his titles have been stripped in the most mortifying way possible by his late mother. And lots of people say quite rightly so, they have been stripped. But because he's royal, that is why this is such a huge story.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit, Rupert, about the films, the imminent films, because there's not just one film being made, just one in the pipeline about the infamous Emily Maitlis interview, but actually 2 films, I think, already receiving a great deal of publicity. One of them starring Gillian Anderson, very well funded. These aren't kind of small indie films that are going to fall by the wayside. These are great, big films that are going to get an enormous amount of publicity, all of it damaging to the royal family.
all of it damaging. And remember, when he did this interview, it was most people watch it wide-eyed with bewilderment and shock. But the thing was, he is allegedly said, as he walked on, and said, well, that seemed to go all right, didn't it? Well, funnily enough, it didn't. And this is part of his problem. He thought it was a good idea to do the interview in the first place, but clearly now we've got even more spotlight with these new films. But when it occurred at the time, it compounded his problem. Because with all the things, the Pizza Express, he didn't sweat, and all the other things that he said in the interview just seemed to put him further and further in a bit of a pickle. And as a result, obviously, he's since that interview, he's settled out of court with Virginia Giuffre. We've got more things going on now. It will not go away because, as he said at the time, I didn't know her. So you just question why he felt it was necessary to do that interview in the first place. And then, obviously, the fallout from it has actually made it worse for him. But part of the problem is that sometimes he thinks he knows best. And in this case, he certainly didn't. And the interest in that interview has led to 2 films being made.
2 films being made about it. And Pandora, I don't know what stood out for you most at the time, but I certainly noticed at the time, I think many people obviously did, that he didn't apologise.
No.
He didn't express any sort of compassion for the girls who had suffered. He didn't say, well, I didn't know her and I don't remember it. And this was nothing to do with me, but I'm awfully sorry for anybody who suffered or anything like that. It wasn't that kind of tone at all, was it?
No, and I think his approach was, well, I'm going to stay well away from it as possible, categorically deny anything happened, but then at the same time, show no emotion, which evidently is not going to go down well with the public, because when you see the royal family, you want them to be, engaging, emotive with you, you want to feel like you're on a similar level to them. But again, no emotion, didn't apologise, and that's not going to sit down well with the public image. If you're public facing, you want the people who are representing the country with very important people in the room, you want them to represent you. You want them to feel empathy with people and victims. And unfortunately, it just has not gone his way whatsoever. And as we've already said, this isn't going to be something that he's going to be able to just shy away from, despite the fact his reputation is in tatters and £12 million later.
Rupert, do you think we ask too much of the royal family in that we have Pandora here saying, you want to feel that the royal family are capable of empathy, you want to feel that we're all on the same kind of, on the same basis in life, but actually they're royal and they're treated in a very different way from everybody else, and it's really too much to expect them to have the common touch as well as to lead a life so rarefied, so incredibly different from the lives that any of us lead. I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you can't emulate the way the royal family lives, however much you want to, even if you did want to. I'm not sure anyone would really want to, but if you did, you couldn't. So what I mean is, is it too much to ask for them to be royal and also somehow accessible and empathetic to ordinary people? Is Prince Andrew's arrogance not his fault at all?
Well, he was obviously extremely comfortable and liked the trimmings and trappings of his position, and that was his problem. But actually, the royal family are aware that actually what they've got to try and do is have the common touch. We all know they live a gilded lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle none of us will understand. Everything is done for them, and particularly for the King, the Prince of Wales, everything is ordered and organised, so they're not getting the iron out. So the fact is they have a very different lifestyle, but we want to see them when they're out about being able to, quite rightly as Pandora said, they've got to look as if they're genuinely interested. The trouble with Prince Andrew, if you're going to, you've got to actually engage positive and mean it. And sometimes you're feeling that he was just going through the motions and would expect everyone to be fawning over him. And that's part of the problem. What he didn't do is bring people along with him to offer him support and really say, right, okay, we believe you. You're saying you're innocent. But that never seemed to happen because that interview with Emily Maitlis just turned more people against him because of the lack of sympathy, empathy, and actually sort of wide-eyed bewilderment at some of the things that he was saying. So that's been his problem. It's probably been his problem throughout his life, that he always thought he was slightly better than the rest of us in certain instances.
All right, let's change the subject now and let's go, Rupert, to Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, and her appearance. And it's a rather interesting sort of level and nature of appearance in a particular online coffee commercial. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yes, for a coffee company, there she is. Basically, she seems to be just in the background. She's invested in this coffee company. And actually, I don't see it's anything wrong with this. People might describe it as cheesy. Well, a lot of stuff on Instagram is pretty cheesy. It may not, I'm maybe not the target market. But clearly, this is a brand that is supposed to be associating with the sort of 20-somethings and 30-somethings. And having Meghan in the background, she is invested in it. I think is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And it shows a sort of cheeky side. And it's no different if you think about it. The Mike Tindall and Zara Feltz are always appearing in podcasts and things, indeed one now. So I think we've just got to back off and just let her get on with it. It's part of her new life. It seems to me pretty innocuous and inoffensive. And if it does a bit of good for her company, well, that's the lead life she needs and is leading now. So I don't have a problem with it. It's not my bag, but it seems to be perfectly inoffensive and, a little bit of fun.
So, Pandora, there's Meghan. She's not front and centre. She's not the star of the ad.
No.
She's a kind of walk-on bit part.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's the person that's going to get them all the coverage. We all get that, and so does she. But it shows a very different side of her. We don't usually see her on the sidelines of anything, do we, really?
Yeah, it's showing the cheeky, fun side of her. I'm not sure how far you can go with that with a coffee ad when I say fun and cheeky. But it is, I suppose, showing us a different side to her than we see of that glitzy, glam, royal side, which is why she's left the royal life behind her. And of course, we do have to remember they do need to be financially independent. So, I'm all here for it. And of course, she knows how Hollywood works. She knows that's going to be, across hundreds and thousands of articles. So she's got what she's wanted. And I wouldn't say it was at all controversial in any which way. And she's got into headlines without slandering the royal family at the same time. So good for her.
It's light-hearted. Yeah. I don't know whether we can accuse her of slander. I don't know whether you can do that either.
I know.
But let's talk about Mike Tindall. Now, I think he's a mate of yours, Rupert. I think you're friendly with Mike and Zara Tindall. And this is a podcast, and you might want to tell us a little bit about it because it reveals, doesn't it? I think maybe we can actually hear him saying it in person. This is Mike Tindall on a podcast. Listen to what he has to say.
For the Prince of Wales, he is known as Pint Willy. He is known to me as Pint Willy because he's not the best of drinkers, coming from a sport where it's built on the social aspect and a couple of beers being sunk quite often. So that is one that I will definitely give away for the Prince of Wales. Pint Willy. There you go. It's out there now. Sorry, sir.
So they're very good-natured, they're very good-humoured. Zara certainly isn't trying to shut her husband Mike Tindall up, is she? She's just laughing along encouragingly. He's being a tiny bit mischievous, but not all that mischievous. Have you ever heard the Prince of Wales being called Pint Willy before?
Not in public or in private, but I do know that that Mike is he's a good bloke basically. And look, he does these podcasts where he actually every so often you get a little bit of revelation. We saw the one during the build-up to the Rugby World Cup where we heard about the competitive nature between the Waleses on the sporting front. So there's always a little something, a little soupçon that is offered to the listeners. And obviously, Pint Willy. I tell you what now, next time he turns up his beloved Aston Villa, there'll be obviously all the Villa fans will be turning around and calling him Pint Willy. So it'll be entertaining. I'm sure it won't go away, but I'm sure he'll take it in good spirit. And I'm sure maybe at Christmas he might be allowed to have 2 pints. But clearly, I think that's added, it's a bit of fun. Just like the Meghan Instagram is, it's all a bit of fun and good-natured, but a nice juicy tidbit that is obviously going to grab a few headlines and a lot of listeners to the podcast, which is all in a very good cause for MND.
Yes, and who doesn't want a bit of fun at this time of year? Thank you both very much indeed.